I'm glad you still accepted my email invitation when I asked whether I could interview you about not having grants but on a farm. Because it's effectively, I guess that is what we'll be talking about, how you don't have big grants, but you have a farm instead.
Yep. Trade-off.
Yeah, I mean, as we'll talk about, it seems to be a conscious choice. But I was curious. I mean, so basically, I thought we could maybe, I mean, how I often do it, start in a kind of biographical sense, to like a rough story of how people got what they're doing. And I thought in your case, it might make sense also because from what I understand, you are, as we'll get to later in more detail, involved in some non-profits, if that's the correct term. And I think one of them in particular is one that you profited from when you were younger. From what I understand, I think you read somewhere that you were a not profiteer. That's the wrong word, but you profited from I think the California Alliance for Minority Participation, something like that. So I thought we could maybe go through your career a little bit to kind of maybe also understand a little bit more why you're doing what you're doing. I mean, yeah, maybe very broadly, and you can kind of take this up wherever you want to. But like, when did you become interested in doing science for a career?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that that sometimes I tell my students is that I never wanted to go to college when I was younger, and I didn't think that I would get in.
Why not?
Like a lot of students here and probably in other places, I'm a first generation student. My mom graduated high school, but my father didn't, so I didn't know about the process or what it could be or what it could do and how it could kind of benefit me. I actually wanted to be a personal trainer and a Taekwondo instructor, but my mom forced me to apply to college. And of course, I'm forever thankful to her for that, because that's why I am here where I am today. And the story about kind of like CAMP, the California Alliance for Minority Participation, I had actually submitted my intent to register at one university. And I had planned to go to that college. After I got in, I was very happy, but also anxious. And one night I went with my mom for a walk at a different local university, and we got lost. And it was dark. We were kind of in the park of the university. And we went up to an office that we saw there was a light on. This office was the camp office. And the person who was in charge of camp, Geek friend at that time, we knocked on her door and she like opened the blinds and looked at us kind of like, what do you want? What are you doing? Why are you here in the evening whenever everyone's supposed to be gone? Eventually she welcomed us in, and she actually kind of recruited me that day to go to that university. So I kind of got rid of my intent for the other university and went to UC Irvine. And then she was in charge of camp, and camp is one of the reasons why I think I was able to be successful as an undergraduate, even after going on academic probation and having her help me out of that.
Yeah, again, we'll talk a little bit more about what you actually do, or what your involvement is, but just briefly, what does camp do? I mean, it seems to be pretty official then if there's on campus of the university an office. Kind of just what do they do? And yeah.
The California Alliance for Minority Participation, so CAMP, it's the goal is to diversify the scientific workforce by increasing the number of people from underrepresented groups with bachelor degrees, and to go on and get graduate degrees in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So it's a UC-wide program, University of California-wide at all the 9 undergraduate campuses. And yeah, it's been very successful. It's funded by the National Science Foundation, and at Riverside, what we do is we have faculty mentored research experiences for the students, many of whom are what we call first generation students, and kind of trying to figure out academia and research and like next steps, kind of like I just mentioned. So we have professional development activities. We have grad school fee waivers. We have a course that kind of helps them prepare for applying to grad school, and the students have been really successful in getting into grad school, and some of them even call it like a science boot camp.
What did going back to that time you were lost and then found your home for the next 3 years, what did the lady, how did she convince you to go there? Or, I mean, was it just, having a face associated with the university and someone telling you how it works, or what did she do?
Well, she's very convincing. And I went to that office with my mom, who was also very convincing at the time. And Kika began to talk to my mom and kind of and myself and kind of tell us about camp and ask me questions. And she made sure to make it known that if I were to go to UC Irvine, that she would be there to help me and take care of me and watch over me. And because of that, the decision was kind of a lot easier, because at the other university, I had no one. I didn't really know what to expect. But to have just one person to say, I'll be here, I'm going to help you, I'm going to guide you, I'm going to connect you with these different groups. There's a summer program prior to freshman year that we're going to get you involved with. We're going to talk with financial aid and the library. It was just perfect.
It's funny. I haven't thought about this in years, but I just remembered that, like, when I grew up mainly in Germany, or I went to school in Germany, but I decided I wanted to go to, or I was at least considering going to the UK, back to the UK where I was born, to study. And so there was this like university fair kind of small thing, somewhat close to where I lived, where basically a bunch of British universities that each just sent like one person. And then, they all had their little stand, and you could just go there and like ask them about university, and they'd, tell you something. And it's kind of funny because again, I hadn't thought about this probably since I was there. They were basically, because I wanted to go to London, there were a few London universities, and in the end, for the kind of academic profile I had, let's say, as we discussed before, as someone who didn't really do school in that sense, there were a few available in London that, you could get into without good grades. And yeah, I think actually, like, when I actually applied, it was probably one of the reasons I applied to Goldsmiths, where I ended up studying, was probably because they had someone at that fair. There's, City University in London would be a similar profile, but I guess they were just like a big anonymous thing to me. Whereas the other thing, I don't know, I talked to someone about it for a few minutes, and that just made it a lot more. I mean, it didn't, obviously. there was nothing I learned from that guy that really meant anything, right? It was all fairly generic. I mean, all the people there were like just pleasant and just like, oh yeah, you can do that at this, our university, and probably all said the same thing anyway. But I don't know. There's something about having like some sort of something specific about a place that, I guess, like, especially when you're like, I'm assuming you were also then just like 18 or something like that, makes it somehow seem less daunting to go to this like
like a human connection, right? Like another human cares about you.
Yeah, I guess in your case, actually, someone you will see again, which made it a lot more concrete.
Yes,
but I mean, so you said you thought you were not going to get in, but it wasn't necessarily because you had bad grades or anything like that. I mean, I guess you must have had. Well, I mean, I don't know how it works actually in the US with the applications. Is it based on grades, or can you say, hey, I'm great at Taekwondo, so
I think, it helps to have the extracurricular activities, but the grades are also very important, and you have to have all of the kind of a collection of courses that you've taken in order to get into the university, so that you meet all the requirements. Back then, we also had like the SAT, the SAT test. Now I think a lot of universities are getting rid of that. But yeah, I didn't have too bad of grades from high school to go to the university. But these days, you need to get like a 4.2 out of 4.0 to be kind of competitive, which is
more than 100%.
It's getting just more. Yeah, it's getting more competitive. So you have to take AP classes, honors, and all these things to kind of put yourself ahead of the rest to be recognized.
I just realized that when you said all those terms you just said, maybe as a general, like short, I mean, just for people listening, because I mean, we'll be talking, I guess, a lot about the academic system and all the kind of fuzzy stuff that is often not discussed, but actually very important. I guess we'll be talking about a lot of that, grants, what's valued in academia, and all these kind of things. There's a beautiful noun that I'm missing right now, but I just wanted to say that, like, I guess you're in the US and I'm not in the US, so yes. I guess whatever you say might not apply that much to European systems, and whatever my experience are, probably not to the US. Just so people are aware of that, it's probably not going to be one-to-one, but I guess just having a bunch of ideas out there probably going to be useful. But yeah, just so, for example, like, I don't know what an AP class is or anything like that.
Oh, yeah.
An advanced program, is that what it is?
Yeah, it's... Yeah, I mean, I mentioned also the SAT test. That's the Scholastic Aptitude Test. AP means advanced placement. So you take a course and then you take a test at the end to get college credit. So these are all things that kind of put people ahead of the game and more competitive to get into a university.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you basically decided you want to go to Irvine then. And what did you do?
I went to Irvine. I initially applied under computer engineering, didn't enjoy it as much, switched to computer science, did some programming, didn't enjoy that as much, and eventually I switched to applied mathematics, and I just did a lot better and enjoyed it much more.
I see. So I assumed, I mean, yeah, I guess we're not really be talking that much about your actual research today, but I always assumed it was more like biology or something like that you studied, because you ended up, I know I read like viruses. That's the main term I remembered. I figured, okay, anyway, but you ended up, like, what I've heard in the US is also very broad anyway, still in your undergraduate, right? It's not, I mean, especially in Europe, I think, I mean, depending on your degree, but many degrees are just like, if you do maths, you do maths for 3 years, right? Like,
yeah, here at a lot of the universities, the first 2 years, a lot of times you're taking general courses that you need to graduate with your degree. And then in the kind of last 2 years, you really delve deep into your major. So you had mentioned that, you thought maybe I was doing biology. One of the things that I did as an undergraduate was try to focus on mathematical biology. So that was kind of like, that might help a little bit to frame how I kind of got to be doing what I'm doing now with, like, epidemiology and viruses and working with community members.
Right. And I mean, what do you think you were going to do, basically? I mean, because I guess you didn't plan on being a scientist. Was it, you thought, okay, I'll just do this, see what college is like, and then go and do Taekwondo again? Or did you lose that? Are you still doing that? But yeah, basically, I mean, those are two completely separate questions. But maybe, yeah. I mean, so basically, what did you think you were going to do then? Was throughout your undergraduate, and how did that change?
Yeah, when I was actually in undergrad, I did do some. I did try to keep up with the Taekwondo. There was a Taekwondo kind of team at the university, and I was practicing with them for a while. But what I had planned to do after graduating was to be an actuary. And I don't know if you know the term actuary. A lot of people don't know exactly what it is here, but
sounds like something vaguely like taxation and law.
Yeah. I mean, they kind of analyze the costs of risk, any kind of financial uncertainty. A lot of people who do that work for like hedge funds and try to predict what's happening in the stock market or otherwise. So I was thinking that initially for like a goal after graduation. But then when I was ready to graduate, maybe coming up to the last year, I kind of realized I didn't enjoy kind of doing math all day, per se. And also there were a few jobs available at the time. So I applied to a master's in public health program with some motivation from one of my friends who was doing a PhD at UCLA that I met in South Africa for a public health program. And she convinced me to apply, and then I got in and I studied epidemiology, which is really the most, or kind of a math version of public health, where you get to apply concepts into public health and the study of disease.
I guess that's something you probably have to explain a little bit less these days, right? Than you maybe had to 10 years ago.
Absolutely. And it's great that people know a little bit more about public health, and hopefully that also translates to more funding going to public health departments and programs, because I know that they're terribly overworked and underfunded. And I know that the pandemic is not over, and there's going to be more things coming in the future that we need to prepare for.
But you said you met this person who convinced you in South Africa on some sort of public health thing. So I guess you were already interested in it, right?
I was kind of already interested because I think I mentioned when I was in undergrad, one of the things that I did a project on mathematical biology in terms of predicting the spread of different HIV genotypes globally. And that kind of got me interested in HIV. And then I applied to this summer program at University of Cape Town and got linked to a really wonderful kind of mentor, Collins Arianbua. And then that's where I met Tiffany Penniman, who was doing her PhD at UCLA. And she said, Brandon, you should go for an MPH if you're interested in this kind of stuff. So I did.
And then straight into PhD, or after that, or?
Yeah, so the MPH program is 2 years, and then into the second year, I was thinking, what am I going to do next? There weren't a lot of job prospects that I could see at the time that I would be super competitive for. So yeah, I just decided, let's just keep going because I'm here already. Let's see what's next. And I applied to a bunch of PhD programs, and I got into 2 of them. And then I elected to go to one of them in international health at Hopkins. It was a good program.
But if I understand it correctly, you basically ended up continuing your studies out of not that many jobs being there, and because I guess you were already there.
Correct. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. It was kind of a way almost to put off the decision of what am I going to be doing for a job in the future, but also making sure that I'm continuously getting more educated and maybe hopefully more competitive for a job that could come up in the future. And I definitely, one of the things that that I can also mention is I never planned or thought that I could be competitive or could be interested or would eventually get like a job in academia. That just is not something that crossed my mind. It's not something that I feel like I got training to do. But really, I think what a lot of these PhD programs do, their intent is to train people to kind of like be the peers of those who are training them. Because those who are training them in academia, they're in academia, they know about academia, and they're training you with what they know about the knowledge of academia. So what ends up happening is you know a lot about academia.
Yeah, and then you can listen to a podcast where people talk more about it. You learn even more about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to. Basically, I don't exactly want to skip over more or less most of your career, but also I guess we do want to get to those topics. So I don't know whether there's. I mean, basically, you've been writing a few kind of columns, I guess, for Nature and for Science, and about kind of academic careers. I think that's what it's called, right? Academic career column or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about. I don't know. Is there anything else we should mention before that, or should we just talk about chickens?
I mean, I think that the only thing before that might be interesting to talk about before those would be that prior to getting the faculty position, I did do some kind of study abroad stuff in Singapore and spent a lot of time in Peru. And I feel that if people have the opportunity to kind of go to a different place and kind of immerse themselves in a different culture, climate, and kind of geographical setting, I think that is super useful for learning about the world. That's it, really.
So your career columns. Yeah, as I said, basically the combination will be you don't have career grants, but a farm. And maybe to link to something you said earlier when you thought you maybe weren't going to be a competitive in academia, or I hope that I got it correctly there. Is that, I mean, so one thing we'll be talking a little bit about with your essay about big grants. I mean, it's not that you haven't had any grants, but you haven't had the like big grants. You talk about basically other kinds of recognition in academia and other kinds of contributions, rather than just bringing in lots of money from a funding organization. I'm curious, is it a coincidence that you've done all these other things? Basically, it seems to me it's almost like you just took a different route, basically, right, to getting to have this kind of tenured faculty position. Was that also big? I mean, did you basically think I'm not going to be able to compete with that, so I'll just do whatever else I think is interesting and useful, or was that just a coincidence?
Yeah, I think there maybe wasn't a conscious decision to go against the grain so much. In terms of like the standard journey in academia, which is for a lot of the universities here, like what people call an R1 or a research intensive university. The expectation is that you do get these big grants, like through the National Institutes of Health, like an R01 type grant, or a few R21 grants, which are for maybe like 1 to 2 years. The R01 is maybe like 5 years of funding to do a large project.
For like with like multiple PhD students or postdocs or something like that, or those kind of like several $1 million, probably, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Several $1 million, where you have, co-investigators or maybe co-PIs. You have community partners, a community advisory board, you have students, you have postdocs, big teams to help you achieve the goals of the grant. So while I didn't apply for those grants, it doesn't mean, I don't think that I didn't apply because I was trying to say, I'll show you, I'm going to do it my own way. I feel like I just kind of went on a different path, and I was able to be successful by getting smaller grants, by taking advantage of maybe publicly available data sets, by being on different study teams where people did have large grants, where I could kind of bring some value to the table with my experience in research ethics and publishing, and maybe kind of administering stuff. But yeah, I think the intent was not to go against the grain, but maybe most recently it's become that a bit more, where people are telling me, hey, Brandon, you need to go for like NIH, you need to get an R01, you need to do this, and that. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't really want to do that. I'm kind of enjoying the things that I'm doing right now. And I think that if I do that, and talking with some of my colleagues that are doing that, it doesn't seem to bring a whole lot of joy. And right now I'm like really interested in bringing myself and those around me a lot of joy.
Yeah, I mean, this is also, I guess, like why so I initially read that column. I think that's also your most recent one, or at least someone probably tweeted about it, and I was procrastinating, so I saw it. But basically, the reason I found that interesting is because I guess I just started my postdoc 2 months ago. And I'm in this kind of position where I still don't really know whether I want to do the whole being a professor, having my own lab, and well, I mean, these are all separate things also, and that's maybe also what we'll talk about a little bit. But I guess it seems to me that the kind of model of what you should do as a professor these days, in at least the kind of stuff I'm interested in, like computational neuroscience in humans, roughly, is to get these big grants, and then, I mean, that's how you get a professorship often in the first place, right? You get, like in Europe, like an ERC grant for like $2 million or I don't know, however much it is. Then they give you a professorship in recognition for that. And then, from and it just seems to me that that's kind of what you're supposed to do. And that lots of people then kind of, I don't know, it seems to me there's a large proportion of professors who are kind of like, I don't know exactly what the English word would be, but there's a beautiful, slightly negative term in German. But basically that they spend most of the time trying to get money. And I don't know, it just seems, in some sense I could see myself doing it because I think I could be good at that. But it also seems vaguely depressing. And so I guess we'll talk a little bit more. Like that's why I invited you also, right? So to kind of talk about these kind of how you can have a career without doing that, or all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, but also I think some people do get a lot of joy out of that. You get like the endorphins in writing the grants and then in getting the grants, and then oftentimes what you have to do once you get a grant is you write another grant to get the next grant while you're doing your grant. And just exactly. So that you like remain funded. Money. Yeah. Yeah. But it's also about maybe taking care of all the people that are currently funded on your grant. So you also don't want to let them down. So you have like external pressure to make sure that you are continuously competitive. That way you can continuously make sure to pay people their salaries, whether they're students, staff, postdocs.
Yeah, I think the appeal of it is very obvious in that sense, right? I mean, if you are the kind of person who can have a grant where there is usually money, then stuff happens in your lab, and you can do cool stuff that you couldn't do on your own, and the people who work for you probably are a bit more relaxed because they know, like, if something happens, you have money to pay them a bit longer if necessary. And there's obviously like lots of good reasons for doing that. And I also recognize that, I mean, for example, I also don't like programming, and that's how I spend a fair amount of my time. And I recognize that maybe writing a grant for me would actually probably be more fun than debugging my code. I do recognize that. It's just, I don't know. For me, that's just like I've written 2 fellowship applications right now, so just for me to get money. And there's just something about that just makes me just a little bit sad when I do it. There's just something soul crushing about it, about this like asking for money. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, but that's, at least in academia, I feel like we have to do that all the time, right? So depending on your career and where you're working, and you'd mentioned that, if where you're at, actually, if you get a big grant and you're doing great research, this is when you can be like offered a professorship.
Here it seems like it to me. I mean, to me, it seems like often like how people get these positions are by saying like, hey, or let's put it this way, if you have one of those things, and I think it's a lot easier.
Yeah, it makes you more competitive, right?
I mean, you're basically saying, hey, can I be a professor? I can employ 5 people, whatever, right? I mean,
right.
From my money, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think here in the US it seems to be, and maybe it's global, it seems to be getting more competitive. Like the job market for academia seems to be getting more competitive. So in the past, to get a position as assistant professor, you might be going against a dozen or dozens of applicants, but now it could be like hundreds of applicants that you're competing against. And whereas before, maybe you didn't need a lot of publications, or that wasn't really expected because you're going to get those on the way because they're being written up. Now it's like, where are your publications? Where is your grant funding? What are you doing right now? What's like under review? So it seems like it's a lot more than it at least was for me when I was applying.
Yeah, I think that's the case everywhere. I mean, I remember when I was applying for PhD positions, some of the people who had done PhDs in very good places, they said, like, I don't think I would get in these days. Like with the stuff I had, I would not get in these days anymore.
Yeah.
I was like, well, that's nice to hear.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of sad, right? And because by the time you do your PhD, you've already done a lot of school. By the time you get into a postdoc, you've already, put yourself above the rest to get that position. And then what's next? Like if you want to go into academia, there's different tracks that you can go into, but here the one that most people want is the like a state-funded position where your salary is guaranteed, and that's what a lot of people are interested in because
sorry, as right opposed now, to else, what you're having your own money through some sort of agency that you got, or
yeah, as opposed to like a contract for a year or 2 years or 3 years, or as opposed to having a position where the expectation is maybe you need to be teaching 8 classes or 10 classes a year, and that doesn't leave you a lot of time to do the research that you really wanted to do, which for some people is why they got into academia in the first place, but for others, they love to do the teaching, so there's like different tracks.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, I guess because we can, take this in so many different ways, and so I think maybe we can focus this by taking my preferences, because that's all I care about, sure. Which is research. I mean, I wouldn't mind teaching. I think there are like 2 or 3 courses I wouldn't mind teaching because like specific topics I'd be interested in. I mean, roughly like, 2 topical things and 1 methods kind of thing. So I could see myself doing that, but probably also not more than like 5 times. I think then I get bored. I don't know. I've never done it. Uh-huh. But so yeah, let's maybe assume that or gear our conversation a little bit more towards people who want to do science and are in it for that. And because I mean, it seems to me, especially in the UK, I think in the UK, there's a slightly different system where you start off as a lecturer, where you give lots of lectures, then senior lecturer, reader, and professor. You kind of can work your way up that way. But it starts, with I mean, I think it starts with teaching everywhere, right? Where the more junior you are, the less choices you have and fewer choices you have.
Correct.
Okay, one question I had about grants is because you said, you don't have the big ones, but you've had a few smaller ones. My initial reaction to that was, isn't that just inefficient? I mean, so this obviously depends on the success rates of different grants and blah, blah, blah. But it seems to me also that like having one big grant would, be worth, I don't know, 5 small grants or whatever, depending on the grant size. But I was just curious about that. Is it basically why not apply, put all your effort into getting a big grant or a few big grants? In terms of like efficiency or effectiveness. Why did you do it that way?
That's a great point. And I think one of the things that kind of goes into the NIH lifestyle here for the big grants, let's think about like an R01 that's like a 5-year multi-million-dollar grant, is that if you apply, depending on the agency within the National Institute of Health that you apply to, your success rate might be like anywhere from 8% to like 25 or 30%, depending on the agency and depending on the year.
Big range, yeah.
Yeah, I think the range is more like on the lower end, at least for the R01. But some of the grants that I applied to, I think the success rate is much, much higher, which I kind of enjoy. So for the NIH, it takes, I think, a lot of people many years and many cycles of applications and revisions to kind of get in the foot in the door. But once they're in, it seems like they're able to kind of get more grants, because once you get a grant, you're likely to get more grants from that agency. But it's just a game that I've never had like a passion for playing, to use all of that time for something that may not ever be funded, and for which maybe the scientific reviewers might not like my idea. And it could depend on their mood for the day. It could depend on their scientific background, or it could depend on really anything. And I really don't like that.
Yeah. But I guess once you get one of those, then you don't have to do the small grants for a few years, right? So like
True.
I mean, yeah. I guess the stakes are higher, but the odds are lower.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and the other grants that I've received have been more like 2-year grants.
What you do with a 2-year grant, is that for, because I guess that's not enough for a PhD student or anything like that, or I don't know, actually, maybe this is, again, now we get to the differences in systems. PhD students in the US, are they always through the university program, or because this is now very, I guess we have to be careful not to get like bogged down in the details. But I guess the reason I'm asking is that in Germany, often the PhD students are employed through the supervisor, but 2 years by itself wouldn't be enough for PhD. So that's kind of why I'm asking.
Yeah, I think here it depends. So when I was doing my PhD, the first 2 years were funded by the university. And then that was when I took all my classes. I was a TA. I was doing these different things. I applied for a predoctoral fellowship, and then upon entering the university itself offered me a fellowship to kind of do those first 2 years. And then for my dissertation, I actually wrote a proposal for that and got it funded. So it didn't have to be that my PhD advisor actually had money for me to go there. It was just something that that was already there for me. So in that way, it might be a little bit different from what you're describing, but it's also, I think, field specific.
Right, but like with a 2-year grant, let's say, what would you be able to do with that? Is it for postdoc, or what would that fund basically?
Yeah, I've had grad students on those 2-year grants because if we want to think about the ideal normative time to a PhD, at least in public health, it might be 4 years. Get in and get out and go on to the next thing. Same thing for a postdoc. When I did my postdoc, my goal was to get in and then get out and then start my career. Because even with a postdoc, some people think of postdocs as trainees, and I wanted to kind of be more independent. I wanted to be in charge of what I was doing. So I was like, all right, I got this postdoc. I'm going to take advantage of it. I'm going to publish, and right now I'm going to try to get some grants, and I'm also going to start applying to faculty positions immediately.
Okay. Yeah, that's something that I want to ask about that in a second, about that kind of thing, because I think I have a slightly unusual plan for my postdoc phase, and I want to get some sort of complete, I guess, see what you think. Before that, I just, going back to the small grants versus big grants, I think it's fun. It's interesting. So I did my background is in psychology and neuroscience. But now I'm at a economics department officially where we do neuroeconomics. And I think I just had my first economics thought, which was, I was wondering whether the market is efficient in terms of, these grants, because it seems to me like you're kind of saying almost as if the big grants are getting too much attention and the small grants offer a better, do you think they offer a higher, expected reward, or do you just think for you personally, you'd rather just apply for something where you have a reasonable chance of getting it? Kind of, do you see what I mean? Like the contrast?
Yeah. I think it's both, because I think, anytime that someone here is applying for a grant from the National Institute of Health, the success rate is going to be low in general, and they publish the success rates online. But if I'm applying for a small grant through another foundation like the PCORI, Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, or through an investigator-initiated program with a pharmaceutical company, those success rates, in my view, while they're not published, are much higher. And they could also lead to other grants through NIH, which some of them are leading to right now, which is really cool.
But also like adjusted for the amount that you get. Right? Because, if the others are worth 10 times as much or whatever, then, obviously the chances are lower, but you still think it's worth it's still a better gamble, basically. God,
I still do.
Sound like an economist now. This is getting terrible.
Yeah, I still do, and the reason is because, like, let's say today, if I applied for an NIH R01 grant, I may get scored on it, which means it's kind of in the upper, or it's within the top 50% of applications, or I may not get scored. But no matter what happens, I'm going to get some reviews where people tell me what was good and bad about the application. And if it doesn't get scored, it means it's not going to get funded for sure. So I need to try again. I need to kind of go back to the drawing board, meet with my investigative team and with my community, and kind of talk about where to go from here. And sometimes it's a deal breaker and that idea is kind of like done. And other times there's room for improvement to kind of modify the study idea to make sure that it does get funding. But that also means like a little bit of give and take, because you want it to be funded and you want to do what you want it to do, but you also might need to make some modifications to make sure that people who are reviewing it deem it fundable.
Yeah. There was a bit of playing the game there, right? Where you need to do what you think that other people expect.
Yeah, and I feel like for the other grants that I'm applying for, I feel like I have more independence in what I want to do. To be able to say, well, okay, you didn't like this idea, I'm going to go shop it over here. Or you didn't like this idea, I have another idea that I'm really interested in, so let me pitch that next. And it's okay, and it's not going to be, it's not going to take a year to get reviewed. It's going to take a couple months.
Okay, yeah. Want to go, as I mentioned earlier, postdoc. I had a few questions there. Yeah. So like basically, so I have a slightly unusual plan where I think because I want to do science, and right now I don't, I feel like also I spent basically my PhD figuring out what I want to do. So I don't actually have a huge amount of experience in the particular question that I want to do and in the methods involved. So because of that, I feel like basically there's basically like two different approaches to like the thing I want to study that I'm interested in. And I basically want to do like one postdoc for a few years in one approach, and then after that, the second postdoc with the other approach. Mm-hmm. And I think it's kind of fairly reasonable in that sense. I was just curious what some of the maybe unexpected implications of that could be. I mean, now I'm in a lab where I can, obviously supervised, but it's not like I'm told what to do. Working on a project, and I can pretty much do exactly what I wanted to do, which is also, why I'm in this lab. I don't have the problem that you mentioned, the potential one of being like just someone who works there and has to, fill a role in that sense. But I am wondering if, for example, like one unexpected consequence is that, or whether this is true, is that I think a lot of these grants, they often have, you have these like years until you can apply for stuff. Like you can apply until like 3 to 7 years after your PhD. You are officially in this category of researcher.
Right.
And I'm obviously blowing through that if I basically want to spend like 8 years doing a postdoc. I'm just curious, like with that kind of stuff in mind, what you think, because I'd basically like to spend like 2 times 4 years doing a postdoc, where I just get like really, really good at what I want to do, and then, then I can do admin.
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like during your postdoc, what you're doing is you're like improving your methods. Is that what you're doing? Since you said you're going to get really, really good.
I'm just getting really good at the stuff at these two approaches, basically. And obviously, I hope I'm going to improve the approach of the field as a whole. But I'm trying to get very good at these things and just know exactly what I'm doing. Basically, that's the idea.
No, that makes sense. The only caveat that I would have, because at least here, I know a few people that have been doing a postdoc for a while, and I think one of them who's been doing it for maybe around 8 years, as you mentioned. There could be times when people from the outside can kind of, after a long period of time, could kind of view you as, oh, you are a postdoc, and you are not like you're not a peer, right? You're not a peer because you're staying there and you're doing what you want to do and you're continuously being funded. And they might not see it the same way as you're describing, which is kind of gaining expertise and, continuously improving your methods to build up your expertise.
I mean, I view it basically as a way to just actually do science rather than all this other stuff around it, like teaching a course or doing some like university admin or blah, 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 right? It's basically just like my attempt to actually do science. That's basically what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I understand. And part of the trade-off in getting the faculty position is that you will be expected to do those other things that you just mentioned, which is, teach a course or, mentor this number of students, which is the norm in the department, or doing this kind of service in the department. And then, coming up with your file each year, every few years to move up in terms of merit and promotion. And sometimes a lot of that stuff could take your time and energy away from the science that you want to do, to kind of distract you from what exactly is the thing that you got into in the first place. But it's also kind of par for the course, and it becomes the norm. And there's ways to make sure that you have a balance in everything and that it works. But when I did my postdoc, I got the postdoc position right after my PhD. And then I did it for about 9 months. And I got a joint postdoc somewhere else. And so I was, working really hard. I was trying to publish a lot of my papers for my PhD. I was applying for a few of these small grants and gaining some skills on laboratory protocols and things like that. And I was like, well, this is great, but I don't necessarily like to be in this kind of trainee phase. I'm just ready. I just want to get started in this academic life and be in this professor track, because I feel like here I'm kind of stuck and I want to get to that next step. Not just because of the salary is different, which here it was kind of different, but also because I felt that it was just the next step and I wanted to get there as soon as possible. And I could do other things kind of along the way.
But I mean, is that mainly, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is that whether, I mean, in a sense to me, I guess like I feel like that is what I can do as a postdoc. Like do my own thing and work on my questions and, basically, other than being able to, get money in so other people can do part of the work that I now have to do. I don't see that much of and the salary, I don't see that much of a benefit in, for actually being on some sort of tenure track, whatever the system might be where I would do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems to me basically like from what you said that a lot of that was just about how you felt about the role rather than, because I guess, I mean, I'm being a bit vague here, but I guess it seems to me that I was a little bit surprised because I feel that way about a postdoc, almost the way you thought about a professorship, it seems to be almost, of like being able to do my thing.
And it might be like different differences between the institutions where we are, like between the U.S. institutions and the institution in Switzerland or in Germany, for example.
It seems to me
that might be a difference.
Yeah, there's such big differences. I mean, even in fields, like what I found weird is that so I'm now at a neuroeconomics institute. So officially it's an economics department, but we basically all do cognitive neuroscience, but about kind of questions that economists are also sometimes interested in. And what I find kind of wild is that economists, it seems to me like, from what I can tell, they often become assistant professor like right after their PhD, which is, I'm sure it exists, but very rarely in neuroscience. I mean, it feels like everyone I know in neuroscience did at least 2-3 years of postdoc. Whereas in econ, it seems like people, they don't even have a publication. They just have like 2 working papers. And then the assistant professor at like prestigious universities. And I don't know, it's weird to like put together because even like within one place, the 2 fields seem to be so different.
Yeah.
So I guess it's really specific.
Yeah, maybe it sounds like there's more kind of training and more postdoctoral work expected in one of those fields versus the other field.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's just it seems to me to be a whole different system. I mean, even just publications are completely different from what I can tell in economics compared to psychology and neuroscience. Because I think their review process could take years because they like really, it seems like from what I can tell, like they're really trying to like polish them and make the papers great. Rather than, I think in psychology often it can be a bit more of a, let's get it out.
Yeah, and thinking about perfection versus, does this need to get out right now or not? Or can it wait?
Yeah, but I guess I'm just realizing like how idiosyncratic a lot of these questions are. I mean, obviously I can, ask the people in the lab I'm in, my supervisor in the institute and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just realizing in trying to now have this conversation that's slightly broader, it's actually not that easy because it seems to be so different between fields. And you're from a slightly different field than, not like miles away, but, I guess far away enough. That a lot of these things, can be just very specific to a particular place and research area.
Yeah, and there's other questions that I think are super important that maybe nobody asks in any kind of place or research area, or maybe you can tell me if it's similar to where you are. So having deep conversations about salaries and role and negotiating your position and what academia is really like and what to expect. And, what are the pros and cons and what are the alternatives? The idea of intellectual freedom versus money is how some people see academia versus, non-academia, but also how to stand up for yourself and how to tackle, like imposter phenomenon and how to be firm in doing what you want to do and making sure that the things that you absolutely don't want to do because they're going to be distraction and have nothing to do with your goals are not things that you're going to be pursuing, but also kind of being careful because it's like a dance and you want to be viewed as a team player, and how reviews work for faculty for merit and promotion, getting the next step. And some of these things are very different, I think, as you mentioned, by institution and field.
Yeah. I mean, for me as, someone who's German and English, the systems they're getting a bit more similar now. But in England, it was, I think it's basically, if you want to, just comparing those 2 countries, it seems to me like England or Germany is way better for doing a PhD because you're often on a salary, you earn more relative, at least to the living conditions and all that kind of stuff. And I think that can often be better. But for example, if you want to do a kind of tenure track kind of thing, I mean, that's changing, but that almost doesn't exist in Germany. It's almost this weird thing where it's like you're professor or not. Like it's not like, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but and now they've added these like junior professorships, which is like a tenure track thing, I think, more or less. But yeah, in England, I think the entry is very gentle from being a lecturer, and then you can get promoted a few times, and then you're a professor. Whereas in Germany, I think it's a lot steeper in this, like after your PhD, basically, or after. Yeah, this is weird. You can be a postdoc, but then being a professor is actually a much bigger step. And those are just 2 pretty similar Western European countries. I mean,
yeah, that's interesting, and I think here there is there are people that could stumble at the universities here from like the postdoc to the next position, and to make sure that that you carry value with you to this next position, and value in terms of like that the people that are reviewing your application see you as valuable and they want to hire you. And sometimes that doesn't always happen, right? And there's different reasons why that happens and why that doesn't happen. But often here it's like you do the PhD, you do a postdoc, and then you have assistant professor, associate professor, and full professor. But getting into the assistant, that's like kind of a pretty difficult thing that you have to win over a lot of people to get. But also getting to associate and full, those are also kind of big hurdles, and they have different hurdles for different people for different reasons.
I mean, so let's maybe talk a little bit about the kind of different contributions that you can, or not you, but one can have in the academic system. I mean, I think the two obvious ones I would imagine are publications and grants. How much money you get in and where you publish, right? I think those are the like two obvious ones. So I guess we probably don't need to talk about those that much, because I think it's fairly obvious that those are, yeah, I mean, maybe as we said, you maybe don't have to have both of them to the full extent. For some places you do probably, but you know, but maybe the kind of what else is there? What are some things that basically maybe you think from your career that where you've had contributions that are maybe not necessarily the things that are super obvious that those can be useful? I mean, not that they can't be used for an economic system, but like educational system. But that they would actually help for promoting your career.
So, I mean, apart from grants and publications, the other two things in general that we are evaluated and measured here by are teaching and service. And teaching means like the courses that you're teaching, and it means like mentoring, whether it be undergrads, grads, junior faculty, postdocs, anything across the gamut. And then service could be like committee service, local, national, international. So for me, I think the thing that's helped with my teaching and service has been my work with camp. And it kind of, it worked out really well because I actually care about it and I'm committed to it. And it's, I think, something that's difficult to find, where people could judge me on this thing that I actually believe in. And so maybe that's kind of rare. But also for myself, it's probably also important to acknowledge that as I've been able to like rise up through the ranks, I probably had a easier time than other people because I haven't been bullied or harassed or intimidated. And I know this happens also in academia. Yes. Yet.
There's always time.
I'm a bit older, right? I have this gray hair, and people might feel bad because of this gray hair to do that kind of thing to an old man. But I also
don't think you're that. You don't seem that old that you're going to get the sympathy non-bullying yet. Yeah. I think it's going to take a while.
But I'm also, I exercise every morning. I might be
the taekwondo.
I might be intimidating to bully or harass or intimidate, right? So I don't face that barrier, and maybe I don't face the different barriers of like racism, sexism, homophobia, ableism that other people might face as they try to take the same kind of path. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that could prevent people who have really great work that they're doing in research, teaching, and service that are not able to kind of make it because of people holding them back.
Right, yeah. But I mean, that's the case always, right? Even if you have great publications. And I guess with some stuff like funding and publications, I guess at some point there's like an objectivity to that's hard to deny. But, if you say like, I'm bringing $5 million with me, it's like, well, I am very sexist, but I will let you in with the $5 million. Yeah, so I mean, that's true. These, I guess what I mean is just like those, it seems to me like those things would apply even if we think about the traditional measures that we might have in academia, right? Like publications and grants.
Yeah. Yeah, and these days, even with publications, the movement is to for different journals to charge for publication, right? It's kind of being more and more towards that trend, which makes me think about the quality of the papers that are accepted, including my own, because we pay for that. We pay for it to be reviewed. And so it's different, because in the past, I don't remember a lot of different journals that would charge for kind of open access kind of thing. But now the movement is towards open access. And, you know, it used to be like PLOS ONE and BMJ, but now it's a lot of journals in my field that in the past did not charge.
Practically all of them, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to have like complete open access. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't looked into what the processing fees for Nature are, but I'm assuming they have some for open access.
Yeah, and for some journals, there's no choice. Like, we are open access journal. If you publish with us, you will pay $3,500, $3,500 US.
Yeah. That's this whole weird thing where something that is in principle very good has led to this secondary problem, I guess.
Yeah, and predatory journals, because you know, if different kind of emerging journals that are predatory, if they see that other very high impact classical journals are charging, then they say, okay, we will charge too, and we will make our name kind of similar to the name of this journal, and we will continue to make money, and your paper will be published, you'll be happy, and we'll be happy. But then we have to think, okay, is this journal that I published in, is it, you know, recognized as something that is predatory? Does it have an impact factor? Is it on, you know, PubMed? What's going on?
You mean like everyone's favorite journal, Nature, Science, and Cell? I mean, sometimes I feel like with these predatory things, there's actually a genius to it.
Yes.
You know, actually calling your journal Nature, Science, and Cell, so people can say they published in Nature, Science, and Cell. It's fantastic.
Yes.
It's so good. It's almost worth doing it just for the joke.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I mean, maybe to maybe talk a little bit about, to use a few examples. I mean, you mentioned I can't remember what you called it, teaching and service and whatever you called it. One thing I was surprised by is, for example, when I applied for the fellowship, I could actually mention the podcast, because it's a kind of like public communication, of science. So I'm curious, like, you know, that's not something I thought this would not help in my career, but maybe it does do a little bit. I don't know. But yeah, kind of what else can fall into that? I mean, is it just like supervising students and teaching courses? Is that pretty much it mainly? And then occasionally some, like, you know, giving a little bit of lecture or doing some interviews or that kind of thing for like public outreach, or what kind of falls into that?
Yeah, in terms of service?
Yeah, this like one bucket you mentioned earlier with.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think doing the service that we kind of love and enjoy is important. Probably for you, it seems like your podcast is something that brings you joy, and you just mentioned that something that you're able to kind of include, which I think is a huge win-win, right? Because you care about it and other people value it. So this is a huge win-win for me. Like working as faculty director for the CAMP program, which is a program that, you know, I was able to take advantage of when I was an undergraduate and get kind of assistance and professional development and resources from. Now I could kind of give back to the students that are kind of where I was back in 1999, which was a while ago. But it's really rewarding to be able to do that. There's also, you know, I think you had mentioned before, like nonprofit stuff. So I work with a community-based nonprofit that kind of addresses racial justice and health disparities. It's called Trivolution.
Yeah, can you say a little bit more about that? Because I looked at the website, I couldn't quite figure out what it does. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's yeah. What is that? What are the what do they do, and what do you do as part of that?
Yeah, it's based in Riverside here in California. Initially, what they were doing was offering kind of HIV testing and counseling for LGBTQ plus people, but they also now offer behavioral health services, emergency housing support, internships, fellowships.
It's like an organization people can contact if they have any of these issues, or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or if they just want to go there and talk and be part of the community within the Riverside community, they're welcome to go there. I've been on that board of directors, I think, for almost 10 years now. I got interested in working kind of locally with them after working with an NGO in Peru focused on HIV prevention and LGBT health. But our board here at Trivolution is composed of like a lot of local and national leaders excelling in their own fields, but they kind of lend their expertise to Trivolution to advance the mission and help bring new groundbreaking kind of ideas to life. And now we have Project Legacy, which is a campus with wraparound services for clients, including transitional housing, and they've been active for about a year now, and more projects coming down the pike from our CEO Gabe.
But but so your work is also quite like organizational in that sense. I get it.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to convince the folks in academia of like what I'm doing, and sometimes they also ask, how much time are you spending outside of your role at the institution?
Then you have to say a lot, but not that much that it takes away from my main work, or what's the balance?
We have like an upper limit of the amount of hours that we're supposed to contribute, outside of the university to different things, and we have to report this.
How much is that for you? Is it like the same for everyone, or?
It's the same for everyone, and it's a lot of hours, and it really depends on what you're doing for the different organizations. So since I sit on a board, they kind of pay close attention to that because they don't want me to get fully distracted and give all my time, energy, hours to Trivolution where I'm kind of neglecting UC Riverside.
All your students,
yeah. Yeah. So, but, since I kind of see myself doing a few things, I'll do research on research ethics. I'm building some research ethics training for community members. I'm going to be teaching on research ethics and for the CAMP program, and then I do CAMP faculty director and then Trivolution. And those are like my big buckets. But I'm also working on, talking about helping people navigate academia.
So how much time can you give to that? Like, what is the number? Also, I mean, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but...
the number of hours?
Yeah, I was just curious, like, how much the university allows you to spend on other stuff. I mean, are we talking like 10 hours a week, or like what are we talking about here?
I'll have to look it up, but the way that it works is a number of hours quarterly.
I see. Okay.
And then you have to kind of get permission for working a number of hours, and also for if you make any money doing certain work outside of the university, you have to get like pre-permission to do that stuff, and then you have to report it quarterly, and then someone like reviews it and makes sure that, as you said, you're not totally neglecting your career for the position that pays you.
Say all that money you earn for working for camp. I imagine it's in the millions.
There are ways to make money in academia, but it's not like, the reason that a lot of us get into it, right? We get into it because we want to do the science that we care about, and we want to help change the world.
Yeah, I'd imagine if you want to make money, you can do it better than with Revolution and camp. They are probably more profitable. Well, you could start a scientific journal. Be more profitable. Anyway. A little social commentary there. I want to ask, you mentioned it already earlier a little bit, and you had a column. That's the word I'm looking for. You had a column about this negotiation in academia. Yeah, maybe you just wanted to say briefly kind of what that column was about. Because kind of what kind of things, or maybe what kind of things can we negotiate for?
Yeah. I mean, the real reason why I wrote that column is because I feel that I got burned in my first faculty position out of the postdoc, where I didn't really ask questions. I didn't really ask for anything. I kind of trusted the person on the other end that gave me a handshake deal. Hey, come here and I'm going to take care of you. And then it just ended up not happening. So it was a learning experience. And the reason why I wrote that article is to kind of help other people understand that there's no such thing as a handshake deal. In academia, maybe in other careers there are, but it's important to get everything in writing as part of your negotiations. And the time when you have the most negotiating power, or maybe the only negotiating power, is before you get the job. Once you have the job, your power kind of decreases significantly, unless you get like a huge grant and every university in the world is really wanting you, then that's helpful.
But do you really have negotiating power before? Because it seems to me, I mean, I would imagine that in a job market where you have 100 applicants for one place, you can make a small request here or there, but at some point they go like, we have other people we could give this job to. So I'm a little bit surprised when you said that. Do you really have much power beforehand?
You do, and the reason is because by the time that you get an offer, they want you. So by the time you get your offer for a position, it means that the university actually wants you to go there. And since they want you to go there, you've kind of risen to the top of all of the other candidates that they've been interviewing. So you have a lot of power because, I mean, maybe you can't ask for a house, a car, a separate apartment, and these kinds of things. But depending on your position, you actually can. Maybe not as you're coming out of a postdoc to a junior faculty, but if you're coming into a deanship or a chancellorship or, a distinguished professor, you can ask for things that at this point might be ridiculous, but for another person, this is like a given. You need to give this to me or else I'm not coming.
Yeah, but those are, I'm assuming, I think if you've reached that position, then it's also clear that you have more negotiating power, right?
Yeah.
But it's, I guess I was referring more to, I'm assuming, basically I'm applying for a tenure track position at a very good place. And then I'm lucky enough to be offered the place. And it just seemed to me like, I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah.
And they could hire someone else who would probably be just as good. So that's kind of what I meant with not much power in the negotiation.
I mean, that's also part of the imposter phenomenon, what you just mentioned. So it's really great that you just mentioned it because you just said, I'm happy to just be here and get this offer. And maybe that's what the people on the other side of the table expect, but there's always room for negotiation. And there's always room to ask questions. And there's always room, once you get this, offer, you need to share it with your mentors and with people you trust and think about what are the things that you absolutely need. And then what are the things that maybe you want that aren't deal breakers, and kind of go from there. So you do have a lot of power because at that point you are the top choice, and they want you because you're the top choice. So they're going to want to kind of give you what you want to make sure that you're successful and happy.
Okay. And I mean, I guess that the reason I'm just slightly surprised by that is it just seems to me that, I mean, sure, if you're vastly overqualified, then it's one thing. But I'm assuming, if you're applying to be at a very good place, then, as I said, like they might want you, but like for some random reason, because basically they have like 5 applicants who are all basically would be amazing, right? That's kind of what I mean by it's basically like because there's no lack of alternatives, because there are very good alternatives, it's basically like, here's the offer. There's a little bit of wiggle room, but one of the other 4 will take it. But I guess, yeah.
I mean, that's definitely something that the person on the other side could say. that, hey, if you don't accept these terms as I've given them to you, then we're not going to give you the position. But that could also be a reason to like think twice about that position. Like, wait, they don't want to give me, how many years of funding are guaranteed? How many classes am I going to be teaching? Do I have a lab? Do I have an office? Do I have what's the startup funding? Is $2 appropriate for startup funds? Or do I need like a reasonable amount of funds to kind of get started? Do I have parking? Are there moving expenses? So there's a lot of things that are like the things that you should be routinely offered, at least within the...
Those sounded fairly routine to me, like being given an office.
Yeah. Yeah, but we can't take it for advantage, right? I mean, do I have a computer in that office? Do I have, a chair? Or do I have a standing desk? Or, you offered me this salary. Can I negotiate to this amount because I'm going to be bringing in, this grant with me that's going to pay part of my salary? Or things like that.
Yeah. I'm assuming the best negotiation strategy, though, is to have another offer. Is that true? Like when you can say like, well, I've got this offer from the other, your rival. They're winning. And then you just, without lying and doing something illegal, you're creating the image that they're making a better offer.
Yeah, I mean, having a competing offer is always useful. In terms of getting a position. But then if you do mention a competing offer at the time when you are negotiating with a university, then sometimes what they could say is, oh, that's great. I think you should take that offer because it sounds like a wonderful opportunity for you and they have more resources and we want to see you succeed. And sometimes that could be genuine. And sometimes it could just be like, well, we're just not playing that game today. But in terms of like making sure that they keep you at a place once you're already there and once you already have a position, having outside offer letters sometimes is the only way to really kind of move up, get more money, and get more resources, which is sad.
I definitely can't share some of these stories, but I've definitely heard of some people having that kind of power from outside offers and using it to their advantage. Just keep it at that.
Yep.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, I guess to some extent, like, I guess the negotiations are still like negotiation and not playing some sort of weird mind game with the other side. And I guess the hope is that neither are there's always the question, right? Like I said, like, would you want to work with someone where they're just really trying to fuck with you to give you the lowest offer they can? Yeah,
and for a lot of people, for the first position at least, they think, wow, this is wonderful. I'm gonna have my first, real academic job where I'm gonna be independent, and I'm very thankful for this, and I'm gonna take whatever you offer me. But passing those offers and kind of sharing it with people that you trust and asking, what would you think about this, or what are the things I should ask for? And also talking maybe with people in the department and asking about like the departmental climate and if there's some publicly available salaries like we have in the UC system. You can also kind of look to that and be like, wait a minute, you're offering me this, and this is like the norm in the department. So what's going on here? Should I be questioning this? So there's a lot of things that you can do to kind of help yourself with that negotiation rather than just saying, I accept whatever you're willing to give.
Yeah. Do you have any, I don't know how much you can comment on this, but like one thing with salaries that surprised me a little bit is that I always thought, at least in Europe, I think it's often like you have these, for like governmental positions, which basically universities are in most European countries. Like right now, I'm in Zurich. I'm employed at the University of Zurich, which is part of the Canton Zurich, which is, it's all very official. And they have like, if you're a postdoc, then you're in this category, in that classification, and then that's your salary, right? I'm assuming there's a bit more wiggle room, maybe if you're a professor, and that kind of stuff. But I was just curious whether you could comment a little bit on that, because it seems to me a lot of cases this is pretty fixed, but I don't know, maybe that's a false assumption I have, and I should have a word with my supervisor.
Yeah, I think the different universities have different kind of norms. So I could talk about the UC system and say that there are publicly available salaries available for every faculty and staff that work in our system, and also postdocs. But I would also say that there are posted salaries that are the norms for a different rank and step for faculty, like assistant professor step 1, 2, 3, 4, associate professor 1, 2, 3, 4, professor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there's salaries that are kind of like associated with that because this is a state-funded institution. But it doesn't mean that it stops there, because that's where the negotiation could start, from that base. So if you have, grants, if you happen to be someone that's like famous, if you're a Nobel Prize winner, maybe you're not going to adhere to that baseline salary amount because you bring different value with yourself. And that's something that you're going to negotiate for something else. So that's like the starting point that we have. And then if you look at that and then you look at the different salaries of people that are working in the system, you're like, wait a minute, the salaries don't match up what's there posted and what people are actually making. So then you realize, okay, this is all negotiable.
I see. Okay. And you would recommend winning a Nobel Prize? That helps?
I think it could always help, as well as being, part of the National Academy of Medicine here in the United States, at least for people that are going for different positions. That's
you mean
also
like
something
being
that's
part of these like honorary kind of society kind of things?
Yeah.
Like Fellow of the Royal Society in the UK, for example.
Yeah.
Or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Being knighted perhaps might be pretty helpful.
Right. If you're knighted just for your research, I think you'll probably win a Nobel Prize before that. But
True.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. I mean, yeah, again, it would probably depend a little bit on the place, but I guess just it's for people listening, just like putting it out there that there are these kind of, again, like I always assumed it was kind of just like this is what it is, and in many cases it probably will be like that. And if you're applying for a PhD position, I'm assuming it's just like, well, this is the money the agency is giving me for this, so like that's what you're getting.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's still interesting and good to know. And I mean, I was aware that this can happen at the higher levels, but I didn't realize that this could also start, as soon as you're on a tenure track kind of thing.
Yeah, here definitely it can, and it's always negotiable. And I agree that if you are, a PhD student and you are funded by, the federal agencies, then maybe your stipend is this amount. If you're a postdoc funded by a federal agency, your salary is this amount. But then after that, for a lot of even publicly funded universities here, everything's negotiable.
Okay. So one thing you wrote in your piece on building a career without big golden grants, you mentioned that, and you also mentioned it very briefly earlier, that it can help being part of a larger team and, bringing your expertise to that project and helping out. I was, again, surprised by that because I always assume that no one really cares about like author 15 out of 40, basically, and that unless you're first or last author, again, in neuroscience and psychology, that's the last author is the PI and first author is I'm assuming it's the same in your field, but you never know. I think in computer science it's not that way, something like that. Yeah, it's just, I was really surprised by that because I felt like, for me personally, I don't think I would enjoy that kind of work necessarily, because I think I really like having my project that I work on and that I really understand in its entirety, more or less. But yeah, I was just curious, like whether you could comment a bit on that and kind of I think there's an obvious value to doing these large team projects, but in terms of like advancing your career, I was surprised that would actually help unless you're the person leading that thing.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I do think that team science is important. We do have the same kind of, at least in public health, the authorship list where first and last are the most important. But when we report our publications for projects with large teams or team science, and it could be anywhere from, 5 authors to 10 authors, we also report our contributions when we report those publications and what we did on the publications. But I do think that, there's a value of not having to lead every single project that you are working on, because I think we can only handle so much administrative work ourselves. And if we are the PI of a project, then we are in charge of all the administrative work that no one else has to deal with, because we are in charge. We need to work with, the federal agency, with our grants office. We need to work with the IRB. We need to work with, budgets and contracts and grants. And we need to work with the different universities where the other investigators are or the grad students are. So that's a lot of work that kind of takes time away from the science that we want to do. Whereas if we work on someone else's project as in what I call, or what people call, team science, we get to just do the one thing that we are kind of contracted or valued to do. Like if I want to work just on research ethics for a project on HIV, I could do that. And I don't have to worry about all this other stuff. And for me, there's a lot of value in that, because it's still something I care about, but I don't have to deal with the administrative burden of worrying about the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think this might then be a little bit of a difference in terms of field again, because I think most of the things you mentioned, I've never done. And I've, had my projects where I did pretty much all of the work. So maybe this is a little bit of I guess like in the stuff I do, it's often like you have the annoying thing, and that what makes it complicated is that you have to be able to, design the experiment, code the experiment, collect the data, analyze the data, write the paper, all that kind of stuff. But that's it. Like there's no you might, I have spent lots of time writing ethics applications for stuff and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I guess maybe because these are like small lab-based experiments, maybe it's a little bit different.
Yeah, and maybe, one thing that you can do as a PI in your own projects, or that I do, is I make my own projects like a team science, where all the people that are involved in the research that I'm leading, who are also leaders in their own fields and leaders in the field that is kind of related to the grant that I got as PI, is they are doing a lot of this work as well. They are doing some of the analysis. They are doing some of the writing. They could be the first author on the paper. So there's just a lot of value of not having to do every single thing for every single project, whether I lead it or whether I'm part of it, because all these other people that are working together on my team, or that I'm working on their team, we all have value, and we bring different value to those projects, and we kind of contribute in different ways, and we can get a lot more done, I feel, by kind of working together.
Yeah, and I guess you can focus on your favorite thing.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. Yeah, like if your favorite thing is coding, or your least favorite thing is coding, someone else could do that, or you could do it if it's your favorite thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, but going back to the recognition thing, so that's still something that, you think is rewarded, even if, in quotation mark, you only, did this part of the analysis or whatever. You think that,
yeah, especially if you get recognition in terms of co-investigatorship and part of the monies from that grant to do certain things. So it means that you're like kind of the local PI at your university from that grant, where someone else is the PI.
Okay, yeah, I guess that is already a bit more than I was even thinking of. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't know. I still and I see, I think I'm starting to see, for what I'm doing, that there's some things where I have some ideas that I just won't do, because there's only so much time, and there's the main things I want to do. So I could definitely see, with heavy collaboration with other people, saying I think this is a cool project, but it's not as cool as my main project. So do you want to do it?
Exactly, yeah, and if you don't have as much time right now, wait till they throw, teaching classes and be on these committees and blah blah blah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's also, I guess one hope of me actually getting good at something now is that I'm spending most of my time right now just learning stuff. Right, it's just getting to grips with these things. But hopefully at some point I have learned something, and then I can use that. I guess
I think
I must
you
have learned something already. Yeah. But it's right now I'm in the phase where it feels like I haven't.
I think you already have a lot of expertise just from what I've seen, because I've seen some of your papers that I looked up after you sent that email. I'm like, wow, these are cool, and also related. Some of them are like puzzles. So I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, I haven't heard of this or that puzzle, like the chicken one. I'm like, I'm gonna look this up.
Oh, okay, the economic games, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know I've definitely learned a fair amount of stuff in the projects, but right now I'm learning computational modeling, which is a new step, and it feels like it's one of those things where you feel like I don't know anything here. It's kind of exciting and kind of daunting, but yeah, I give it a few months, then I think it will be a lot more familiar. Yeah, so kind of moving on to the some of the other. I guess we've already touched on some parts here and there, but some of the other career columns you wrote one on doing a sabbatical, and the benefits of that, and it was funny. So I read the thing and I was like, oh, let's see what you did for your sabbatical, right? Like what they do. And I have to admit, a little bit, it read like you just worked regular European working hours. It's like you worked 8 instead of 14 hours a day. I'm not entirely sure whether that's a correct characterization, but yeah, briefly, do you want to say kind of what you were maybe doing before the sabbatical, and then kind of why you chose to do it, and what you did?
Yeah, and I agree. The trying to work a normal set of hours is important, and I used to be, before the sabbatical, on way too many committees and doing a lot of service that maybe I didn't value as much, but that I was asked to do just because we needed people to serve on this or that committee or do this service. So the sabbatical was an opportunity to kind of reset everything, because I could like write down, here's all the activities that I'm doing for service, and these are the people that I need to contact, and say, hey, I'm going to be gone for 6 months. You're not going to see me, so I need to resign from these positions. And it was pretty fulfilling to be able to do that, and to just realize the amount of time that was freed up, that I could actually work on other things. Because during the sabbatical, I didn't stop working, but I did drastically decrease the number of hours where I was working, and try to reset myself and kind of think about what's important and what's a science that I want to pursue, and what do I want to do in my career, and things like that. But sometimes people ask me now, hey, are you back from your sabbatical? And I say, yeah, but I'm kind of working my sabbatical hours now because they don't see me as involved as I was before, and I don't want to be as involved as I was before. I think there's like a happy medium between overwork and underwork. People who are paying your salary definitely don't want you to underwork. If you overwork, it's a bonus for them, right? Because you were doing more. But
or if we're able to, as well,
yeah. But we have to find the balance where I have enough time for my real life, my family, my loved ones, my health, and also my job, because this is all a job. And I tried to think about it that way, and I think we all have to think about it that way. This is a job that we're doing. We're doing it because we love it, but it's still a job. And we need to make sure that we take care of ourselves first, so that we live and survive to be able to do this job.
Just random quick question about you mentioning it's just a job and that kind of stuff. Do you think, I'm just curious, just because you come from a non-academic background through your family and that kind of stuff, do you think that has an influence on how you view it or not? Because I guess,
I think that because I'm like a first generation student, and because I had to kind of figure a lot of this stuff out and make a lot of mistakes, and because I asked that same question, like that you mentioned for like the offer, like I should be thankful just to have this position, and asking myself, do I belong here? So I need to like overwork and overcommit and show everybody that like I'm working 200%. So I definitely belong here. Let me prove it to you by overworking and showing you. But doing that for a while can really burn you out. And then it's important to also come to the realization that, you know, if I'm hit by a bus today, that I'll be replaced in everything that I do. So I need to make sure to work on the things that I care about and to do the things that I care about and to take care of myself in order to do this job.
Going back to the sabbatical, would you basically, what kind of forms are there for taking a sabbatical from a kind of practical perspective? I mean, there's I find it kind of slightly amusing almost the way you described, like that you can get these credit points as long as, like, depending on how long you work there, and it, you know, it really seems like, you know, parents giving their children like a small allowance or something like that they can then spend occasionally. I mean, I'm considering doing a bit of a mini sabbatical, like between or after the postdocs thing. But that's, I guess, more of a like natural, also not paid kind of way of doing that. I'm just curious, like, what kind of ways are there for people to take sabbaticals?
Yeah, and I know that sabbaticals are becoming kind of normative outside of academia as well. There's a couple large banks here in the United States that are doing sabbaticals for people that have worked many, many years at that company. And they're starting to recognize that burnout is real. And then if you give people a chance to kind of pause from their work and exit the environment and like experience new things and have time to think and have time to do all the things that they haven't been able to do, that when they come back, they're fully energized and they're like, they bring like a fresh perspective and energy. So I think that's what it did, at least for me. And it helped put things into perspective because I didn't really think before about, you know, saving myself so I could save others and, you know, making sure that I'm healthy, making sure that I spend the time with people that I value in my personal life, as well as to focus on the things that I want to do at work and kind of drop the things that I don't really get too much value out of. But it is kind of funny. Yeah, as you mentioned, you get kind of like an allowance. You get credits based on the amount of years of work that you do. So the more years that you do, the more sabbatical credits that you get. You still have to apply, at least in my university system, for the sabbatical and say, here's the things that I'm going to do during the sabbatical. That way you don't just like leave and you don't do anything, because they still want you to kind of get something out of it academically, since that's the job that we're doing, especially if they're paying us. But it's a nice pause.
But it also seems like to slightly be missing the point. Because then it's in a way, it's just like a grant application with a very high success chance.
Yeah. The success, the chance of success is very, very high. And the paperwork burden, I would say, is very, very low compared to any grant. And you get to propose what you want to do, and maybe some things that you just have not had the chance to do, but that you really have wanted to do. For that part, I think it's nice. I did propose a few things in mind that I wanted to do, like write a grant to focus on participant payment and research, and also write a few of the articles I think that you are asking me about, like the sabbatical and the nature stuff, the career stuff. So that's stuff that I just didn't have time to do before that I really cared about. And now that I'm back, I'm just going to do more of that. And when people ask me, are you back from sabbatical? I say, yeah, I'm back. It's just not going to be the same as it was before.
And changed, man.
People get used to that. Yeah. It's a nice, fresh perspective. And you get to do, you know, things are reset, and now I get to do what I really have wanted to do without all of the expectations from before.
Okay. As a kind of last topic, because I guess we have to wrap this up at some point too. Things you've wanted to do includes, I believe, your farm, which is, I believe, a separate column again. Tell me a little bit. Is actually first question you had on your university website. You have a banner photo which is of lemons. I was curious, is that is that from your farm, or is that just because it looks like it could be something that that you took from your farm and upload, but I don't know what your farm is about, like what you grow there.
I mean, we do have lemons. Let me just check and see which one that I have for the banner. I think that's a standard banner from the university, but we do have a couple lemon trees. We have over 100 orange trees. We have avocado trees. We have figs. We have plums. We have pomegranate apples. Pretty much you name it, we probably have it. Mangoes,
but it's just
strawberries, tomatoes.
Plants, or also animals.
Chickens. Yeah, we got chickens, so we got fresh eggs every day.
Nice. But actually, is it smart to have avocados? I thought they like suck up a huge amount of water, and you're in California. Is that are you contributing to a problem there?
We so the place where I live, it's known as the Greenbelt, and there's a lot of growers here. So this is like the place where a lot of the oranges and a lot of the citrus was grown in Riverside originally. So there's like water rights for folks that live here to make sure that the trees are well hydrated. So we get a discount price on very cheap water to make sure that all the trees are kept healthy, which is nice.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, otherwise, it's not much of a farm. You can't get
otherwise,
water.
it would be very expensive. Yeah.
What's the? I mean, to give people like a bit of an idea of like what it involves to have a farm. I mean, I grew up with we had like a small in our garden, like mainly my mum kept like a few, growing a few vegetables in the garden kind of thing. But it seems like yours is on a quite different scale. We had like 4 fruit trees in our garden that the birds would always just get before we could get anything of it. What's the work involved in caring for citrus fruits and avocados and chickens?
I mean, it's daily. I could look out my window right now from the office where I'm at home, and I see trees and plants and squirrels running across the yard and birds. So obviously it is a lot of work, and sometimes it could be overwhelming with like weeds and gophers and rats and bugs, but it's always worth it because those things right there are just the downsides of living here, and the benefits are kind of really endless. It's like choose your own adventure. I can go outside and pick fruit off of the trees or veggies off the raised beds and just eat. I could have breakfast, lunch, and dinner here, and then cook up some fresh eggs and have that meal. And how many people could say that? And I know that I'm super deeply fortunate to have, this life with my partner here. And I get forced exercise every day outside, watering, harvesting, feeding, and hoeing, not necessarily in that order, but there's a lot to do. But it's hours of work every day that I enjoy most of it.
Most of the time. Yeah. I'm assuming also it tastes way better because I remember my landlord once in when I was in Heidelberg, they had like some sort of like with some other people, they shared like this small little like plot of land somewhere where they grew the stuff, and they had strawberries. And man, like good straw. I mean, I keep forgetting like berries in general, like how good berries taste. But I think for there, it's also the case that, they can grow them to taste amazing rather than to have something that, grows quickly and is good to transport and all this kind of stuff. So I'm assuming the stuff you make also probably tastes way better than what you can get in a normal store.
It tastes way better. The only downside sometimes is what you mentioned, in that the birds or the the little bugs can start to attack things once they get super ripe. So we just had that for our peaches that are now a bit overripe. So now the bees and the bugs are kind of enjoying them. But the good thing is they'll clean the tree. They'll eat the whole peach. So that's kind of nice. One thing I don't like is when the squirrels go up and eat like a few bites off of an avocado and leave it there, and then it falls, and like that's a ruined avocado. Like, come on, squirrels, do better. Finish your avocado.
I hope you catch the squirrels and just hold the avocado opposite them, like, look what you did. Okay, what's the one thing I found kind of interesting? What you wrote is that it sounded to me in the column that a lot of the benefits from doing this farming. I mean, you mentioned, like, I think right at the end was like, obviously a lot of the benefits you can have from other stuff also, but it sounded to me that a lot of the benefit was kind of like a cardio kind of exercise, where you have these like repeated actions that they're not like super hard to do, but they're just kind of, it's a little bit exhausting and a little bit of work to do. And it's just this kind of like monotonous repetitions of something that can often be very beneficial when people go, running or cycling or whatever. I mean, it sounded to me like it was a lot like that.
Yeah. I mean, definitely there is a lot of monotonous repetition, and, the water flows down the furrows, and then a week later I need to take care of the weeds in those furrows. So that's monotonous. And there we have like 2 acres of that. So there's a lot of space to walk. And some days I'll get like 30,000 steps. And that's a lot of steps, right? I mean, because what do they say now that, people need to get 10,000 steps at least just to kind of be active, especially us in academia, because we're sitting a lot, because we need to be in front of the computer or in the lab or doing something like that. So it is kind of forced exercise, but it's also healthy. I mean, to be able to be forced to go out and walk and to kind of see beauty, I think it's nice.
Okay. And are you planning on expanding it, or like doing other things, or like how does that work? I mean, one question I also have for this relates a little bit to this, is that I often find it difficult to have a hobby that I don't kind of turn into a job. Because as soon as I start something, I tend to, at least in my opinion, might be completely wrong, but in my opinion, get fairly good at things relatively quickly. So then I start getting ambitious about it, and then suddenly I'm like stressing myself out about like what I want to achieve for this thing. I'm curious, like, can you do that with farming too? Where you're like, I'm going to do 110 orange trees next year or whatever.
I mean, definitely you can. The orange trees, for example, these are, over 40 years old, and they take a long time to grow. So that would be like a long-term commitment to plant more of those trees. But we could, build more structures. We could immediately get different animals. We could plant new plants and vegetables. We've planted some smaller trees recently, like a Pakistani mulberry, and we're waiting for it to grow and to produce fruit. So just the time that it takes and the nurturing that it takes, like harvesting and feeding and all that stuff, it's pretty rewarding at the end when, you see the fruit that you've been nurturing over a year, 2 years, 3 years. It's pretty amazing.
So at the end of each interview, I ask my guests the same 3 questions. The first is, what's a book or paper you think more people should read? It can be famous, not famous, old, new, just something you think more people should read.
The Alchemist, I think, is a book that I think that I enjoyed reading or listening to. I actually listened to it as a kind of like a book on tape when I'm outside, and I like the idea of kind of pursuing someone pursuing their personal legend, at least in the story. Maybe hopefully not to ruin the story, where the person decides to be a shepherd instead of a priest, as their parents wanted, and then kind of going after their treasure, and how we're meant to pursue things that kind of bring us joy and fulfillment, or that we've always really wanted to do. And I think for a lot of us, we're here because of that. Like we're pursuing our dreams. We're trying to make a difference and make a contribution. So I think that's one really great book that I enjoy.
Okay. At the rare occasion we have actually read what people recommend. It happens. It doesn't happen often. Always makes me feel slightly special. Second question is, what's something you wish you'd learned sooner from your private life, from your work life, whatever you want, but basically something where you think, having learned that a bit sooner would have probably helped you out, and maybe like how you learned it or what you did about it?
I think how important nature is. So sometimes when I describe what I do to family members or friends here, and they see like the scope of work that's involved, they get kind of overwhelmed with kind of the space. Like, how do you do this? How do you do this? Like, there's so much to do. I'm like, well, it's, nature. I get to be in nature every day. I get to contribute to the growth of all these, like trees and plants and animals. And it's really amazing. But maybe in my career, at least, that it's important that we're all replaceable, to know that. So I think I mentioned if I get hit by a bus today, then I'm going to be replaced by, maybe the end of the month on all the duties that I currently have. And things will continue to move forward at the university and in research and in everything without me here. So that's why it's kind of important to pay attention to our own health and wellness and happiness in our personal life, rather than just only focusing on work.
And nature's a good way of doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know that there has even been some studies showing that if you have a window that overlooks something like a tree or plants, that it's beneficial to your health. And I totally agree with that. And in the place where we used to live, we had a window with a view of another structure and another window with a view of like a gate wall. But now I have a view of just nature, and I do feel more grounded.
Yeah. Yeah. Final question. It's always, because I just started a postdoc, the question is kind of to people who are finishing a PhD, starting a postdoc. Any advice there? To some extent, I guess you already gave some throughout the interview, but maybe now in a slightly more explicit form. Any advice for people in this kind of period?
Yeah, I would say for those kind of maybe finishing a postdoc or going into a postdoc, ask lots of questions of your mentors. Ask about, negotiating. That's a big thing that we have to do really in every career that we might pursue, but that we're not really taught how to do. And everything's negotiable. Also, kind of what to expect in academia. So we might not have the best idea of what the next step might be in our career. Maybe we've had really beautiful pictures painted of what it might be like, but there's always some, pros and cons of what the next step might entail. And it's important to go in there with kind of eyes wide open and expectations being reasonable, because there's no perfect job. There's no perfect team. There's no perfect boss. There's no perfect setting, but it's important just to go in with eyes wide open.
Okay. With that, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.